June 6, 1944, 1:30 a.m. Cottontown Peninsula, Normandy. Major General Wilhelm Pfeil, commander of the German 91st Division, sat rigidly in his Pickerville headquarters as the phone rang. What came through the line seemed impossible. Thousands of American paratroopers were descending onto the Cottontown Peninsula, landing behind the Atlantic Wall, the massive fortification Germany had built to prevent exactly this. Pfeil's mind raced. His 88 anti-aircraft batteries hadn't fired a single round. His 12 coastal radar stations detected nothing unusual. Yet the reports kept coming: white parachutes drifting silently over fields, transport planes vanishing into the night, and American soldiers already touching down. Pfeil shook his head. The Atlantic Wall was designed to be unbreakable. Over 2,400 kilometers of fortifications, 2 million mines, hundreds of thousands of obstacles on the beaches, and 12,000 anti-aircraft guns. No airborne force could hope to penetrate such defenses without being completely destroyed. He did not yet know that 13,000 American paratroopers were already behind his lines, silently moving to their objectives. Just 20 minutes earlier, the first wave of C-47 Dakota transport planes had crossed the Norman coast at an altitude of 500 feet, flying at over 100 miles per hour. They were arranged in 9 precise columns, each plane spaced carefully to avoid collisions. The convoy stretched 300 meters in total. From the coast to the designated drop zones, the flight over German-occupied territory lasted only 12 minutes. By the time German radar detected them, calculated their course, and alerted night fighter bases, the paratroopers would already be on the ground. Even before the main wave jumped, Pathfinder teams, elite reconnaissance units, had landed quietly. They carried advanced equipment, including Rebecca radar and Eureka radio beacons, to mark precise drop zones with infrared lights visible only through special goggles. Their mission was critical: guide over 800 aircraft to the exact coordinates of their landing zones. The Germans had no technology to counter this, leaving them blind to the operation. At 1:21 a.m., the 82nd Airborne Division began its descent. Over 6,400 men jumped from 369 aircraft, flying dangerously low above treetops at more than 100 miles per hour. German anti-aircraft fire tore through the formations. Some planes were struck and set ablaze, forcing paratroopers to leap from burning fuselages. Others fell into flooded fields prepared by Rammel, where heavy equipment made survival nearly impossible. Despite these hazards, most soldiers reached their targets. The 505th Parachute Infantry Regiment, the most experienced unit in the 82nd, achieved incredible accuracy, landing within 1 mile of their assigned zones half the time, and within 2 miles 3/4 of the time. It was the most precise airborne operation of D-Day. Pfeil's radio crackled with reports that were both alarming and confusing. Paratroopers were seen near Sainte-Marie-du-Mont, others near the Murderet River. Gliders had crash-landed across open fields, and Pathfinder teams were marking zones with colored lights to guide the following waves. Pfeil studied his map, trying to comprehend what he was hearing. If the reports were correct, an entire American airborne army had been delivered behind his lines. This was no small raid. It was 13,000 men, carried by over 1,000 aircraft, landing in the dead of night. The situation grew even stranger. Reports came from a 40-mile front, with landings appearing almost simultaneous. What Pfeil didn't know was that the Allies had deliberately created confusion. RAF bombers dropped 500 dummy paratroopers, lifelike mannequins with firecrackers designed to simulate gunfire, across the Norman countryside. German units rushed to intercept phantom landings. Radios buzzed with contradictory information. Command and control began to collapse, and German units struggled to respond. By 2 a.m., confirmation arrived: the Americans were attacking. The 505th Regiment had landed precisely on target. American demolition teams were cutting supply lines with explosives, destroying bridges over the Murderet River. Pfeil's 91st Division was suddenly isolated. Fragmented reports continued to pour in, confusing the command further. Pfeil realized he needed to assess the situation personally. The Americans were scattered and vulnerable. If he acted quickly, he might have destroyed them before they organized. At 3 a.m., Phi left headquarters in a Kubelwagen, heading north toward the sound of gunfire, accompanied by his driver and a liaison officer. The roads were dark, lined with thick Norman hedgerows and earth walls topped with dense vegetation. Visibility was barely 15 meters. At 3:30 a.m., his vehicle rounded a corner and encountered a small American patrol from the 82nd Airborne Division. 4 men, hidden behind a hedgerow, opened fire with M1 Garand rifles. 8 rounds of .30-06 caliber bullets flew in 4 seconds, a rate of fire far superior to the German carbine. Phi died instantly. He became the first German general killed on D-Day. With Phi's death, the 91st Division lost its commander, and any hope of organizing a counterattack evaporated. The Atlantic Wall, defended by 2 million mines and 12,000 guns, had been rendered irrelevant, not by frontal assault, but by 13,000 soldiers dropping behind it in 90 minutes. Phi's death symbolized a larger problem. The wall itself, the formidable fortress meant to stop the invasion, had been bypassed. The Americans weren't attacking bunkers, they were destroying roads, blowing up bridges, ambushing convoys, and creating chaos behind the front lines. The Germans had built a wall, but the Americans had simply flown over it. By 4:30 a.m., Lieutenant Colonel Edward Krauss and 180 men from the 505th Regiment had captured Sainte-Marie-du-Mont, raising the American flag in the town square, the first French town liberated on D-Day. German reinforcements trying to reach Utah Beach were forced to detour around the town, adding hours to their travel time. At Lafier, a stone bridge over the Murderette River became a deadly battleground. The 82nd held the western side, while German forces controlled the east. For 3 days, the bridge changed hands in brutal close-quarters fighting, but German troops could not concentrate forces for a proper counterattack. Every attempt to move reinforcements ran into scattered groups of paratroopers, ambushes, and roadblocks. Meanwhile, behind Utah Beach, the 101st Airborne Division secured 3 of the 4 causeways by 8 a.m. When the 4th Infantry Division landed at 6:30 a.m., they faced far fewer obstacles than expected. The inland defenses were disrupted, and the amphibious assault, the riskiest part of the invasion, succeeded because the airborne forces had already secured the terrain inland. By noon, the situation was clear. The Atlantic Wall held at Omaha Beach, where no paratroopers had landed, but at Utah Beach, 13,000 soldiers had dropped behind the defenses, allowing the invasion to succeed with minimal casualties. The wall remained intact, but it was facing the wrong direction. By the next day, June 7th, the strategic situation in Normandy became apparent. The Allies had established 5 beachheads, with over 150,000 troops ashore in the first 24 hours. The airborne forces, scattered 20 miles behind German lines, were still fighting, blocking every attempt at a counterattack. General Field Marshal Erwin Rommel, who had been celebrating his wife's birthday in Germany, returned to headquarters after a grueling 14-hour drive through clogged roads, destroyed bridges, and broken communication lines. Upon reviewing the situation, he immediately recognized the failure of the Atlantic Wall. It wasn't weak, it had held at Omaha Beach, inflicting terrible casualties, but the Americans had bypassed the strongest defenses at Utah Beach, landing with fewer than 200 losses. Causeways were open, and inland roads were cut, making it impossible for German reserves to reach the front in time. Rommel had long warned that the invasion needed to be stopped at the waterline. Once the Allies established a foothold, their industrial capacity would overwhelm any static defense. He wanted panzer divisions positioned close to the coast, ready to counterattack immediately, but Hitler had refused. The armored reserves remained 100 kilometers inland under direct command of the German High Command. Moving them required Hitler's personal approval, a fatal delay. At 4 a.m., while Phi was killed by American paratroopers, Hitler's chief of operations, General Alfred Jodl, was informed of the invasion. He decided not to wake Hitler, believing the reports could wait until morning. By the time Hitler authorized movement of the panzer divisions, 12 critical hours had been lost. Allied fighter bombers relentlessly attacked the moving units. The elite 12th SS Panzer Division, normally able to cover 50 miles in 3 hours, took 18 hours to reach the front, losing 5 tanks and 84 half-tracks to air attacks before engaging. On the Cotentin Peninsula, the situation was even more dire for German forces. The 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions had cut major roads, forcing German units to detour through narrow country lanes. These roads were riddled with ambushes, mines, and obstacles. Movements that should have taken 2 hours stretched into 8. By the time German reinforcements reached the beaches, the Allied positions were consolidated and prepared for defense. The airborne assault had achieved something extraordinary. 13,000 men, spread over 20 miles of enemy territory, had immobilized an entire German army. They did not need to destroy the Atlantic Wall, they had rendered it irrelevant. The wall remained, massive and imposing, but the battle had moved beyond it. Paratroopers controlled the rear, disrupted communications, destroyed infrastructure, and allowed the amphibious forces to land with minimal resistance. June 6, 1944. The D-Day airborne assault and the fall of the Atlantic Wall. The journey that should have taken 2 hours stretched into 8. German reinforcements, delayed and confused, finally arrived only to find the beachhead firmly in Allied hands. At headquarters in La Rung, General Field Marshal Erwin Rommel studied maps and reports, realizing the scale of the achievement. The airborne assault, carried out in the darkness of night, had done something extraordinary. 13,000 men, spread across 20 miles of enemy territory, had effectively paralyzed an entire German army. They had not destroyed the Atlantic Wall. The massive coastal defenses remained intact, with 2,000 bunkers, 2 million mines, and hundreds of thousands of obstacles, but the wall's presence no longer mattered. The fight was happening behind it, where the German command had not expected it. The airborne operations on D-Day, while brilliant, came at a heavy cost. Of the 13,000 soldiers who jumped into Normandy that morning, approximately 2,500 were killed, wounded, or missing within the first 24 hours. The 82nd Airborne Division suffered 1,259 casualties, while the 101st Airborne lost 1,240. Some drowned in the flooded fields of the Murderet River Valley, their heavy gear dragging them under. Others were struck by anti-aircraft fire before they even touched the ground. Many landed directly in the middle of German positions and were captured immediately. Equipment, radios, mortars, and medical supplies were scattered across miles of countryside, lost or destroyed. The airborne landings were just one part of a larger plan that included glider operations. Operation Detroit and Operation Keokuk, launched at 4 a.m., brought reinforcements for the 101st Airborne Division using 52 Waco gliders. Towed by C-47s, the gliders were released at 400 feet and glided silently toward zones marked by Pathfinder teams. Darkness, anti-aircraft fire, and natural obstacles made the landings treacherous. Gliders crashed into hedgerows, trees, and enemy positions. Soldiers were killed instantly, while equipment was shattered on impact. Later that evening, a second wave of 200 gliders delivered artillery, jeeps, and anti-tank guns to the 82nd Airborne. These troops faced heavy fire during landing, and some gliders touched down in the wrong fields, immediately coming under attack. Yet, despite the chaos and losses, the reinforcements reached their objectives, and both airborne divisions began to consolidate their positions. By June 7, the 101st had secured all 4 causeways behind Utah Beach, while the 82nd controlled Sainte Marie du Mont and the bridges spanning the Murderet River. German attempts to counterattack were repeatedly repelled, and reinforcements struggled to reach the front. The beachhead expanded, solidifying the Allies' hold on Normandy. On June 8, elements of the 4th Infantry Division linked up with the 101st near Sainte Marie du Mont, uniting the amphibious and airborne forces into one continuous front. The Atlantic Wall, once considered the centerpiece of German defense strategy, now lay 20 miles behind the Allied lines, irrelevant to the battle being fought. By June 12, the 5 Allied beachheads merged into a single, continuous lodgment, 50 miles wide and 10 miles deep. Over 326,000 troops had landed, along with 54,000 vehicles and 104,000 tons of supplies. The port of Cherbourg, the strategic objective of the Cotentin Peninsula, was under siege. After 20 days of continuous fighting, Cherbourg fell on June 26. The 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions, which had landed behind enemy lines on June 6, had fought relentlessly for 33 days before being withdrawn to England. They suffered 40% casualties but had accomplished their mission. The Atlantic Wall, which had taken 2 years to build at enormous cost in Reichsmarks and human labor, had been bypassed in just 90 minutes by 13,000 men descending from the sky. Its failure wasn't due to weak defenses. Omaha Beach had proven they could inflict catastrophic casualties, but because static fortifications alone could not stop a highly mobile, well-coordinated, technologically advanced force. The D-Day airborne operation was a testament not only to courage and planning but also to industrial power and innovation. The C-47 Dakota transport aircraft were critical to the operation's success. These planes, reliable and versatile, could fly in formation at night, carry paratroopers and equipment through heavy anti-aircraft fire, and deliver them with astonishing precision. Pilots required minimal training, about 200 hours, to operate them safely, and production was sufficient to maintain large-scale operations. By June 1944, the Douglas Aircraft Company was producing 14 C-47s each day, allowing Operation Neptune to be executed on a massive scale. The paratroopers themselves were equipped with T-5 parachutes designed and manufactured in Connecticut, tested rigorously over 2 years. Each chute was packed by hand, inspected 3 times, and guaranteed to open within 2 seconds of deployment. Pathfinder teams carried Eureka radar beacons, developed in Britain and manufactured by Western Electric in the United States, which transmitted signals detectable from 20 miles away. This allowed precise navigation even in darkness and poor weather. The Germans had no equivalent technology, leaving them blind to the airborne assault. American soldiers carried M1 Garand rifles with semi-automatic firing capability and 8-round magazines, providing a significant firepower advantage over German infantry armed with bolt-action Kar 98K rifles. Each paratrooper carried 90 pounds of equipment, including rifles, ammunition, grenades, rations, water, medical supplies, entrenching tools, and gas masks. Supplies were distributed across bags designed to land with the soldier and be quickly accessible on the ground. The 101st Airborne alone required 1,200 tons of equipment for the D-Day jump: parachutes, weapons, radios, medical supplies, and food, all transported from the United States to England, stored securely, distributed, inspected, and loaded onto aircraft in the correct sequence. Germany could not match this scale. By 1944, German forces were stretched across 3 fronts: East, West, and Italy. Fuel and resources were scarce, and aircraft production focused on fighters and bombers rather than transport planes. In contrast, the American economy was operating at full capacity. Factories ran 3 shifts daily, women worked on assembly lines, and Liberty ships delivered supplies across the Atlantic faster than German U-boats could sink them. The airborne assault was as much a demonstration of industrial power as military strategy, supported by over 1,000 aircraft and 2,000 bombers and fighters, coordinated with naval gunfire from 200 warships. The Atlantic Wall still stands today as a monument to a strategy that had become obsolete almost overnight. Visitors can see massive concrete bunkers, some 12 feet thick, with gun placements facing the sea and observation posts overlooking the beaches. Omaha Beach proved that the fortifications could be deadly, inflicting 2,400 casualties on the first day. But even the strongest walls could not stop a mobile, technologically advanced, and industrially supported force. Major General Wilhelm Pfeil, killed at 4 a.m. on June 6, was the first German general to die on D-Day. Driving through the darkness toward his headquarters, he witnessed the invasion's reality firsthand. Paratroopers moving through fields, gliders smashed in hedgerows, American soldiers advancing behind the lines. The Atlantic Wall, which he had helped defend, was no longer relevant. His death symbolized the end of static defense as a viable strategy. Mobility, air power, and industrial capacity had triumphed over fortification and rigid planning. Following D-Day, the 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions continued to fight for 33 more days. They held the Cotentin Peninsula, blocking German reinforcements while the 4th, 9th, and 91st Infantry Divisions pushed north toward Cherbourg. The fighting was brutal, house by house, field by field, hedgerow by hedgerow, against German troops familiar with the terrain and fighting desperately. By June 18, the 9th Infantry Division reached the west coast of the Cotentin Peninsula, isolating Cherbourg from reinforcements. The German garrison, 21,000 strong under Lieutenant General Karl Wilhelm von Schlieben, prepared for a siege. American forces reached the outer defenses of Cherbourg on June 22. Von Schlieben had orders from Hitler to hold the city at all costs and destroy the port to prevent its use even in defeat. He obeyed, mining the harbor, demolishing cranes, and blowing up key infrastructure. The final assault began on June 25. 3 infantry divisions, the 4th, 9th, and 79th, attacked from multiple directions with support from naval gunfire from USS Texas, USS Arkansas, and HMS Glasgow. German defenders fought fiercely from fortified positions and bunkers similar to the Atlantic Wall. Yet the Americans had learned the lessons of D-Day. They avoided frontal assaults whenever possible, infiltrating gaps in the defenses. Engineers cleared paths with explosives, tank destroyers engaged directly from close range, and fighter bombers struck enemy positions as soon as they revealed themselves. After 2 days of fighting, Cherbourg fell on June 27. Von Schlieben surrendered with 800 men in an underground command post. The city was in ruins, the port destroyed, but American engineers immediately began reconstruction. By mid-July, Cherbourg was operational. By August, it handled 12,000 tons of supplies per day. By September, 20,000 tons. The Atlantic Wall, built over 2 years at enormous cost, had delayed the Allies by only 3 weeks. A delay that mattered little against an industrial machine capable of rebuilding faster than Germany could reinforce. The airborne divisions were withdrawn to England on July 13. They had jumped into Normandy with 13,000 men and left with 7,800, a 40% casualty rate, the highest of any American division in the campaign. Despite these losses, the mission was complete. The wall was breached, the beachhead secured, and the path to Germany opened. The lesson of D-Day was clear. Static defenses alone were no longer sufficient to stop a modern army. Mobility, combined with air power, advanced technology, and industrial capacity, had changed the nature of warfare. The Atlantic Wall, once thought invincible, became a symbol of an outdated approach. Major General Wilhelm Phi never saw the future that arrived on June 6, 1944, but he witnessed its beginning in the darkness of Normandy. Surrounded by American paratroopers who had fallen from the sky behind his lines, he realized, too late, that Germany had already lost the war.